complex as anything that we have in our society. It comes with a lot of expectations, and for myself, I find myself kind of grappling with the expectations of being a man. That comes specifically with my own culture and the class I grew up in. So being Latino and then coming from low income space, there was a lot of expectations to be very hyper masculine, I feel. And so there was a lot of difficulty. First of all, I want to say that those are reactions to systemic things that are imposed upon our community, which is to say, when I thought about how men in my life have functioned, whether that's uncles, dads, mentors, coaches, teachers, as Latino men, I think about their roles, the expectations that come along with being a provider for the family. And being rigidly defined by that provider role, and then how society kind of undermines Latino men's ability to become providers in a sense that is in a healthy way. Most of the men I've ever looked up to or have come into my life have been working class men. And so there was a lot of hard work they did. There was a lot of harsh working environment and treatment at those places. And I would see them come home tired and in a bad mood and depleted and possibly within their own, not unbeknownst to them, like psychologically kind of having gone through warfare throughout the day. And so the reaction from them then becomes hardness. And if you're not hard, then you can't survive. So that's kind of like a lot of the expectations that I saw from the men around me was, because our environment was hard, then it requires men to be hard. And because our environment was resource scarce, then it requires the man to provide no matter what, no matter how tired, no matter how depressed, no matter how angry, that if you didn't go to work and put food on the table, that you had failed, and then you had failed your community, you had failed your family. So that's the model that I saw, and that's kind of how I was raised in terms of like being hard. And since I myself wasn't necessarily what one would consider like scary or hard or hypermasculine, then that was a way for me to be alienated from a lot of my community or to be outside of expectations of men that were around me. I definitely internalized a lot of, like, one would say like harmful or hard behavior. Like I would mistreat like siblings, or I would be rough to my sister, or I would, have fights with people in the community. You get in fist fights, or you get in verbal altercations, or you just have to prove your hardness. And so even though I wasn't the hardest in my neighborhood, because that's pretty hard to do, then I find when I come out into multicultural communities that I'm one of the more abrasive people that people meet, or one of the more ruder, rough around the edges. Specifically, like when I got into academic spaces or white collar spaces, I was one of the more rough around the edges kind of guy. So it's something I've had to learn over time to peel back and not necessarily invoke, because there was a time when I was a welder, and that's a very hyper-masculine space. It's very hot, it's full of hot metal, it's full of being physically strong, mentally strong, The environment is hard. It's the hot sun. It's dirt. It's oil. It's metal. So you're expected to be a very rough guy, and there's dirty jokes and all sorts of things. And then I began working in offices where it's predominantly women. There was no cussing. There was no it was just a completely different expectation of like how to perform as a human being. So I've had to learn all that and navigate those different expectations of gender and what that means. So defining myself as a man over time, I didn't necessarily grow up with a father, but I had a whole bunch of different father figures, and so I had to pick and navigate and choose and define myself for myself. I also learned what I don't know. It's an interesting thing because we live in a patriarchal society where power is synonymous with man, with the male gender, and with patriarchy and with avenues of power. So male, man, patriarchy, it all connotes power. And so I've had to learn what power means throughout my life and how situational it is, and what being powerful is, and how responsible one has to be when one has power, or how to navigate power dynamics or understand them, and basically complicate or provide some nuance to what power looks like in the world as we either progress or regress. So that's also an interesting thing I had to learn as I got older, was what it means to embody power, or to look like you're supposed to have power, or to navigate power dynamics that subvert narratives of power, which is to say, what does it look like when I am surrounded by women and my boss is a woman, and many of those who have power are women, those who hire me are women, those who are in more managerial roles who I have to listen to are women. When I'm in the university space and all my professors are women, my colleagues are women. So it's an interesting thing. I think someone who would subscribe to like patriarchal ideology might say that they feel emasculated in those spaces. I don't feel that at all. I think I subscribe to more equitable ideology, so those narratives don't affect me the way I could see someone in either an older generation or a generation that believes in patriarchy. And I see the resurgence through like manosphere conversations where young men who feel alienated by their powerlessness are trying to reach back into like a bygone era and get to a place where men dominate again, which is a very odd thing to hear about but not be a part of, because I don't subscribe to like narratives or podcasts or friends that believe in that kind of manosphere type narrative that suggests men should take power back and that we should revert to overt forms of power by men, and in that space relegate women to subservient roles, or think about women as lesser than, or people to control, or LGBTQ community to marginalize or to demonize. So those are the things I'm navigating as I feel out what being a man is, and just trying to be someone that I could respect at the end of my day and at the end of my life, and think about all the people that I affect as just a human being, and how we connect as human beings. I think manhood, just as any gender, has the ability to be as flexible and as healthy as we want it to be, and that against patriarchal narratives, that manhood is more flexible than we think, and it can be more healthy than we think, and that it is more inclusive than we think, and by making manhood inclusive, that we can begin to address depression within men, because when you don't live up to male standards as they are in patriarchy, that's when you feel like less than a man. And I think feeling like less than a man is debilitating for many. When you don't provide, when you don't subscribe to violence, or when you are not the most smartest or the center of knowledge or the most powerful in the room, then I see men feeling this, buying into a narrative of emasculation that they don't necessarily have to buy into. So, yeah, I think that's kind of how I think about myself as a man.